So looks like we are in. Hi everybody, welcome to today's session of UPSC Buffet by Gallant IAS. Today we will be discussing the 2023 environment questions. So this is a rather interesting year with the kind of questions we had, especially with the environment kind of questions. But I wouldn't recommend you to take cues from this directly, meaning that this is sort of an outlier based questions we had. So I wouldn't recommend you taking exact cues from this, but there are some insights that you could use and actually apply in the coming examinations. So I'll be giving you those inputs or those takeaways on as we discuss these questions. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. So the first question: marsupials are not naturally found in India. Okay, if you have heard about marsupials, then you actually know the answer. And marsupials are something, they are the ones actually carry their younger ones in the pouch, in their body, in their body through a pouch. Basically kangaroos, koalas, and most of them, not just most of them, almost all of them, except maybe for one or two, are found entirely in Australia itself. So there is a drifted evolution taking place. So the entire concentration of marsupials are found in Australia alone. So that is there. So they are not naturally found in India. We don't see those kangaroo-like mammals in India. So that is there. Then marsupials can thrive only in montane grasslands with no predators. Is it so? They actually thrive in grasslands, but do they thrive in montane grasslands? They are found in Australia and across the landscape of Australia, and they are to a point there they have become an invasive species, especially the kangaroos. So given that logic, they are not limited to montane grasslands. They are found along the temperate or tropical grasslands across the Australian continent. So this is wrong. And since this is a statement question, we can actually go straight away to the answer. It's C. So that's it. And one important takeaway is that the reason why marsupials are special is because they are slightly different from normal mammals as well as the egg-laying animals. So they are somewhat a bridge between them. And there is another type of animals. They form the bridge between these mammals and those lay eggs. So these are monotremes. The examples of which are duck-billed platypus and echidnas. Only 5 species of monotremes are there. They are the ones who actually lay eggs, but they are mammals. They have the characteristics of mammals, but they lay eggs. Similar to, not exactly similar to marsupials, but the kind of specialty that marsupials hold, the same way monotremes also holds such a relevance. So learn something about monotremes, and the examples of these are duck-billed platypus and echidnas. So that's a kind of a takeaway from this particular question. We can expect similar question in 2026 or 27, whichever year we are writing this examination. So look for these monotremes. It's very easy, just go through them. A quick Google search will get you the results itself. So that's it. Moving on. Invasive species specialist group. Okay, I'm almost 100% sure that those who all have been attending this exam exactly in 2023, they wouldn't have heard about this thing, but they would have heard about some other thing. The kind of, they would have heard about invasive species. They would have known what are invasive species, and I think all of you who are listening to this class will also be knowing what are invasive species. They are mostly species that are being imported to a newer ecosystem where they doesn't face the competition that they normally face, and hence they thrive and they grow exponentially. This could be animals or plants. Examples are eucalyptus is an invasive species which destroys the ecosystem which they are in because of lack of competition, and they can outperform, and they can take away the resources for rest of the plants. The same way we have got African catfish. They kill our normal aquatic species, and they thrive because they don't have any natural predator in our ecosystem. That is why African snail, African catfish, they are all invasive species, and they are not invasive species in their natural ecosystem, but when they are introduced into a newer ecosystem where they don't face enough competition, they become invasive species. So basically they are natural threat to any ecosystem, whether it be plant or animal. They are natural threat to any ecosystem. So that's one thing, to have a list of organisms that that are invasive species. Look for them. IUCN. What do? They actually, the basic thing we know is that they actually categorize the organisms based on their level of threat they face, based on near threatened or critically endangered or vulnerable, etc. So they are very much in line with conservation of ecosystem, especially animals and plants. So they are a very good contender for this sort of a group. Then UNEP. UNEP is mostly regarding conservation activity, obviously, but they are not really into species specific programs. They are mostly leading umbrella programs or ecosystem based programs. That's one another thing. Then United Nations World Commission for Environment and Development. Again, environment conservation, those sort of activities will be undertaken. No species specific or organism specific or animal or plant specific programs will be undertaken by UNEP or even UNCED. So these two are actually gone. Then WWF. They actually make sense because they're animal centric or they're plant or animal centric. They're species centric programs they initiates, but they are mostly in the lines of conservation and protection. Even IUCN is also in the name of conservation, but they are mostly on the lines of think tank. They actually categorize these organisms. They actually lead species centric and species specialized programs. So compared to WWF, IUCN makes for a better proposition for this particular initiative. So that's the reason why we choose IUCN over WWF. And as I have told, the reasons why we have eliminated these two is because they are not generally species centric and they are mostly general conservation oriented. So that's about it. Moving on. Next question. Okay, this is slightly interesting, but the way the options are being given has made it very difficult, to be honest, because even if you know one option, had there been the usual 1, 2, 3 type of options, we could have been able to eliminate it. But this is slightly difficult. This has been made very difficult because of the way the options has been set. Otherwise we would have got some way to solve this question. Because one thing we know is Malabar civet. It's a very elusive species. We don't see them often, and the reason why we don't see them often is because they're nocturnal only. So we can obviously say that Malabar civet is nocturnal. Lion-tailed macaque, if you know that, since they are very important species and they are a keystone species in various national parks in Kerala. So the one particular trait of them is that they are diurnal, meaning that they are active at daytime, not at night, and they are they sleep or they are at a state of rest during night, and they are active during the daytime. That's a very known fact about lion-tailed macaque. And Malabar civet, if you know that, it's a elusive species, meaning that it's nocturnal only. And the thing about sambar deer is that, like most deer species, they are crepuscular, meaning that they are active during the time of dawn and dusk, meaning that they are not active during daytime or night, the time in between. When the time when the sun almost rises and the day starts, and also when the sun also starts setting and the day ends, dawn and dusk. So those time they are active. So hence we can actually eliminate sambar deer also. So which among the following, how many of the above are generally nocturnal or most considered active after sunset? We have got only one here. So this is crepuscular. So sambar deer is crepuscular, lion-tailed macaque is diurnal, and we have Malabar civet as nocturnal. Okay, that's the basic thing. Learn about this. If you are learning about any animal, try to learn about these things as well, whether they are nocturnal, diurnal or crepuscular. Okay, so the answer is A. So moving on. Which of the following organisms perform waggle dance for others of their kin to indicate the direction and the distance to source of their food? As always I say, human-like intelligence, human behavior. There are only two possible insects doing that. Insects, okay, very careful. I'm not saying organisms or animals, insects. So human-like intelligence, human behavior, social behavior. Two insects perform those sort of actions very well, and they are ants and honeybees. If in the option ants or honeybees are there, choose them. Okay, in this option, really we have honeybees only. Go for it. That would be the answer. These are the key takeaways. Human behavior, human-like intelligence. There will be only two options, honeybees or ants. In the options given, if either ant or honeybee is there, they would be the answer. Okay, you don't have to go for butterflies, dragonflies, wasp or anything. They exhibit human-like intelligence. So that's it. Okay, this is the one of the easiest question I would say in that particular area, because this doesn't test anything. This just test your general awareness. That's it. Some mushrooms have medicinal properties. Obviously, mushrooms being food, they would have some sort of medicinal property. Maybe. Some mushrooms have psychoactive properties. Yeah, of course, we all have heard about magic mushrooms. They have psychedelic properties. Yeah. Some mushrooms have insecticidal properties. Yeah, given that's a fungi and there are numerous variations of mushrooms there, they could have some sort of insecticidal properties. Even if you don't know whether they have insecticidal property, think about it. Some of them are poisonous, meaning that they have some sort of defensive mechanism against insects or humans as well, meaning that they could be insecticidal. Some mushrooms have bioluminescent properties. Yeah, we have seen that properties where the mushrooms actually shines on their own, just like a just like what we see in oceans or sea. The bioluminescent properties are also exhibited by mushrooms, so that is there. So mushrooms have insecticidal properties, some mushrooms have bioluminescent properties, yes. So mushrooms are a diverse group. They actually encompass a whole variety of characteristics, features. See, some are poisonous as well. So they could have all of these qualities. So it's very easy, very generalistic. So go for it. You don't have to think too much whether it's insecticidal, bioluminescent. They would have, given the number of mushrooms species out there, there would be something or the other having that. It's a very general statement, general understanding. So go for it. So the answer is all 4. Moving on, consider the following statements regarding Indian squirrels. Okay, the first thing we know about Indian squirrel is that they are arboreal, meaning that they thrive on trees, not on ground. So they built nest by making burrows on the ground? No. We do see them on the ground sometimes. Maybe they are trying to fetch something, trying to get some tiny insects or anything. Other than that, they spend most of their time on the trees. They are arboreal, meaning that this is wrong. They store their food materials like nuts and seeds in ground. This is quite possible because given their nature and the tendency to store things, this is what most rodents does this. Even the rats does this. So there is a possibility that they would also be doing that. So that is true. They are omnivores, obviously. Rodents are mostly omnivores only. They are not strictly herbivores or strictly carnivore. They are omnivores. Yeah, they could be feeding on small insects and they could be feeding on grains, on other normal herbivores kind of diet. So that is true. This is true. This is wrong. So we will be able to choose it only 2. That's how we solve that answer. The basic understanding: Indian squirrel is arboreal. That's the only thing we need to know. Other than that, it's very general. Nothing specific is needed. And to be to have an understanding is that generally most species are omnivores, especially these birds. Even pigeons are omnivores. Don't misunderstand that pigeons are herbivores. They only feed on grains or anything. They actually feed on small insects as well. So most birds, except for some birds or some species of fish, most of them are omnivores only. So that's it. Moving on. So again, the same way the mushroom question has been asked, this is another very general sort of question. It's a very positive and generalistic with very little burden of proof. So some microorganisms can grow in environment with temperature above boiling point of water. Yeah, yes, this is quite possible. The high temperature tolerant varieties of microorganisms are there. There is examples like bereshit bacteria. I don't think it's a bacteria, it's called water bear. It's a tiny microorganism which can survive extreme conditions. So they can survive this boiling point of water. So that is there. Then some microorganisms can grow in environments with temperature below the freezing point of water. Yeah, this is true. The name of the, I got a mistake. The name of the microorganism are actually tardigrades. Bereshit is actually an Israeli expedition to send these tardigrades to the moon and for, to extraterrestrial experiments. So tardigrades are the microorganism. They are also called water bears. They are microorganisms. They can survive in extreme conditions. So they can survive in temperature above boiling point of water. Yes. Freezing point of water. Yes. Even that particular thing can also do the same thing. And there are many other highly resilient varieties of microorganisms. Some microorganisms can grow in highly acidic environment with pH below 3. Yeah, obviously there could be. So all 3 are very possible statements. We cannot actually eliminate any of these. They haven't given anything very extreme, and very specific things are given. Freezing point of water, boiling point of water. From a human perspective, we might think that, okay, boiling point and freezing point are extreme conditions. But from perspective of other microorganisms, that might not be that extreme. Especially pH below 3 and all are very specific for human conditions, not just for any general microorganisms. So that's about it. Very general. Take 3 as right answer. Moving on. Again, which one of the following? I have discussed this in the outlier questions. So which one of the following makes a tool with a hole with a stick to scrape insects from a hole in a tree or a log of wood? Basic idea. In order to do something like this, to make a tool with a stick and to scrape insects, you need to have 2 things. One, you need to have a certain level of intelligence, and secondly, you need to have a hand. So connecting both, which among the following organisms have an arm or a hand for that matter, which is having the dexterity to do such an act, and the intelligence to make a tool. So fishing cat doesn't have an arm, and neither does it would be doing something like this. Mostly it will be focusing on fishing or eating the fish or something like that, not scraping insects. Generally cats are not into feeding on insects as such, especially to scrape insects like ants and all from the log of wood. No, this is highly unlikely. They lack both of the things. They lack an arm and they lack that sort of an intelligence. So that is gone. Orangutan, our closest living relative, does have the intelligence, does have the arm. So very good chance this could be right. Okay, but hold on, we'll move on to the other option. Otter, again same way, this is also an aquatic species and they feed on fishes mostly. They don't have an proper arm, and they don't really have the intelligence to make a tool. So again they are also gone. Sloth bear does have an arm, but compared to orangutan they lack the level of intelligence. So among the given options, the one that has got most intelligence and the most dexterous arm is orangutan. So we take the answer as orangutan. That's how we arrive at the answer. You don't learn about this anywhere. You just face the question as it is, use your logic, and arrive at the answer based on elimination. That's the only way you could be solving this. Okay, so that's it. Also, since I've always told you, going by the, it's an interesting exercise to do. If you want to learn more about species, just look at the options that UPSC has already given. Last day we discussed golden marsier and three other names of the birds, golden ibis, white ibis, things like that. So just look at those species and try to know few things about them. First, their IUCN status, then their habitat, and then their behavior, whether it's nocturnal, crepuscular, or diurnal. So profile these organisms which are already been asked by UPSC based on their IUCN status, distribution, where they are found, and also their behavior, crepuscular, nocturnal, or diurnal, and that's about it. You make a list and you revise it once here and now, and when UPSC asks something about it, you can easily answer the question. So that's one way you can actually to maximize your chances of clearing species questions, right? Also, this is a very interesting thing to do. Learning about species is actually very it's a fulfilling experience. So try doing that. So the answer is orangutan, and that's about it. Moving on, carbon markets are likely to be one of the most widespread tools in the fight against climate change. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What are carbon markets? We trade carbon certificates, meaning that those who save on emissions, they get carbon credits. So those who are emitting, those high polluting industries can buy these carbon credits to offset their emissions. So basically, the emission or controlling of emissions have been brought into a proper capitalist setting, where reducing the emissions can bring in profit, as well as trading of that certificates can bring in profit. So that's basically a profit mechanism for emission reduction has been introduced. A proper capitalistic setup has been introduced through carbon markets. That's the biggest advantage of carbon market. So that's the thing. This is one of the most likely, yes, it's a very, very potential tool in the fight against climate change, because they actually incentivize, emissions reduction. And those who cannot do that, or those industries which are highly polluting, are actually mandated to buy these carbon credits. Effectively, the higher pollution is being transformed into higher expenses, and thereby more carbon credits and more resources for the institutions to fight these emissions. So that's basically a good and very effective tool in fight against climate change. That's true. Carbon markets transfer resources from private sector to the states. Yeah, that's true actually, because in India also we have India Energy Exchange, things like that, where we actually trade the carbon certificates, the green credit scheme, where we the state take initiative to transfer the emission reduction or those sort of activities, and incentivize those activities based on giving credit, and effectively transferring the resources from private sector to the state. Because if the private sector is emitting a lot and they need to purchase these credits, they will be transferring these the resources and the amount to the state only, because state is facilitating this. That is true. But is it the right reason why carbon markets are effective? this is actually a secondary effect, that the carbon markets are actually transferring resources from private sector to the state. But the core reason why carbon markets are the most effective tool is because they bring in the capitalistic element, where there is an incentive to save, to reduce emissions. So that's the basic thing. That's the basic and the most intelligent or the most effective advantage of carbon markets. Trading through certificates in carbon markets actually incentivize and rewards reducing emissions. That's the biggest advantage. So this is not the case. So this is true only, but this is not the best way, or this is not the reason why it's the most widespread tool in fight against climate change, because it's not just about the state. State interventions can have its limitations, but when a proper profit driven mechanism is being introduced, the industries themselves will have the incentive to take up carbon markets or carbon credits. So that's the basic advantage. So option B is the answer. Actually, there was a dispute back in the day whether the statement A or B should be the answer. UPSC has given us B, and the reason is because this doesn't really explain why carbon markets are the best tool. Okay, this is one of the effects of it. The reason why it's is the best tool is because it's basically bringing in the capitalistic setup to the carbon trading. So that's the basic thing. Moving on. What is the role of, with reference to the role of biofilters in recirculating aquaculture system, consider the following statement. Since we are discussing this question, I'll tell you few things about aquaculture. You need to know few, basic, what is aquaculture, what is aquaponics, what is hydroponics. Understanding the differences between the three really helps. Aquaculture means cultivating fishes, basically cultivation of fishes only. Aquaponics meaning that you are cultivating fishes as well as growing crops simultaneously. That's aquaponics. Hydroponics is where you cultivate a specific species in a particular setup where the water is being enriched with nutrients, and where very proper control of the water, running water is there, circulating water is there, and instead of soil we are cultivating that on water based, or water as a medium with nutrient enriched in that system. That is called hydroponics. Then there is aquaponics, then that is aquaculture. So what is aquaculture? Then what is biofilter? From the name itself, we can think that it's a filter, maybe biodegradable, or it is it's not synthetic, or it's organic in its origin. That could be biofilter, just like biochar. Biochar is also an organic material that is naturally formed, and it's not synthetic medium. Same way, biofilters are also naturally formed media. And what could they be doing? Okay, from the name itself, they could be filtering with the waste. That's basically what a filter does. So biofilter provides waste treatment by removing uneaten fish food. From the name itself, that seems like a very probable thing to do. Uneaten fish food could be filtered out by biofilters. Yeah, biofilters convert ammonia present in the fish waste to nitrate. Think about it. Ammonia is NH3, meaning that it does have nitrogen, and nitrate will be a compound formed from nitrogen itself. So biofilters will be able to convert ammonia from the fish waste to nitrate. Ammonia does have the components to convert itself to nitrate. So biofilters can actually do that or catalyze that process. And fish waste does contain ammonia. That we know. Fish waste, the bird waste, etc. They also have, bird poop also has ammonia contained in them. So this is very likely scenario. But the doubt is that whether it's converting ammonia to nitrate or something else. That's the only risk factor there. Whether it's directly converting it to nitrogen gas or something. But the phenomena of converting ammonia to something else through biofilters seems very probable. Okay. Then biofilters increase phosphorus as a nutrient for fish in water. By the name of it. Okay. Would you think that phosphorus is naturally found in water or naturally found in an aquaculture system? The chances is that phosphorus will be found mainly as a waste, not as a nutrient. And phosphorus is not something, if you think about it, phosphorus is not something we associate with the nutrient as such. Yeah, it does form part of the nutrient cycle, but having a higher quantity of phosphorus in water doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing for a fish. Even for humans, phosphorus as a nutrient is very required in very trace quantities, but in a water, if there is high levels of phosphorus or increased level of phosphorus, that seems detrimental to the fish, not very much conducive to their growth or anything. So phosphorus, this is by profiling these compounds or minerals based on their qualities or how harmful they seem for the living organisms and for plants, like organisms as in animals and plants, is important. So phosphorus seems like a slightly harmful sort of mineral or material, and especially for a fish in water. So the chances of biofilters increasing that seems less likely. So I would say that this could be decreased, and they have just changed it to increased to give that statement. So my mind says, or going by that particular logic, this seems wrong. This seems right only, but the only risk factor is whether it's converting ammonia to nitrate or something else. But again, this is possible because ammonia does contain nitrogen, and nitrate is also a compound of nitrogen. So this is possible, okay, but the factuality of that is the only doubt. This is right only. So we have left with, we have gone none, all three, only two or only one. So given this statement and we are actually at a 50-50 situation, I would recommend you to take the risk and go for B. There is a risk that whether it's converting ammonia to nitrate or something else, that is there, but there is a good chance that since ammonia does contain nitrate, or ammonia is capable of being converted to nitrate, we could actually choose it. Okay, that's how we choose it and arrive at the answer as B. And one more thing I want to say is, since UPSC have asked about nitrate, it's worth noting the difference between nitrate and nitrate. Though they sound similar with only a slight spelling change, but the kind of properties they have are extremely different. Nitrate is less harmful and nitrate is extremely harmful and extremely toxic sort of compound. So try to find a difference between nitrate and nitrate. Since we have had a question like this, there's a good chance that something related to this could be asked. I think in 2024 also UPSC has asked similar question that where they worked out with nitrate, nitrite, etc. So try to find the difference between these two. UPSC is slightly leaning onto that side, so it's worth looking at these differences between these two compounds. Okay, that's the takeaway from this particular question. Other than that, like I said, have an idea that phosphorus is not something of a very good or nutrient-like value in higher quantities. So there is no point in increasing phosphorus. If at all there is something, that would be to reduce the phosphorus amount. Of course, phosphorus is a nutrient we all need. Any organism will be need because their cellular structure does depend on phosphorus. But higher number of that would be poisonous only. Moving on, green hydrogen. If you remember correctly, what is green hydrogen? Hydrogen that is being produced through electrolysis of water, and the electricity that is being used to conduct the electrolysis is being sourced from renewable sources. That's it. But right now we are not entirely producing hydrogen as green hydrogen. We are producing hydrogen as grey hydrogen because the energy we are using doesn't really come entirely from renewable sources. That's the issue. Once the green hydrogen is fully it's effectively implemented, it's a very good source of very good replacement for our fossil fuels, because they can be directly used as fuel for internal combustion engine. This is a very good, and this is one of the important qualities of hydrogen, because we can actually use it as a fuel for internal combustion, meaning that we don't have to effectively entirely replace the sort of combustion engines that we have today. So we can actually increase their life cycle. This is one of the biggest advantages of hydrogen as a fuel. That is true. It can be blended with natural gas and used as a fuel for heat or power generation. Since this is possible, this is very much possible. So this is slightly factual thing. You need to know that it can be used directly in internal combustion engine. If that thing is possible, the second statement is very much possible. It can be used in hydrogen fuel cell, obviously. Hydrogen fuel cell that runs on hydrogen, and the important quality of a hydrogen fuel cell is that it actually produces zero emissions. The only emissions that it produces are water vapor, or basically water droplets. The entire energy that is being stored in hydrogen is converted to electrical energy through a chemical reaction in the hydrogen fuel cell, and the only byproduct are water vapor. It's zero emission, it's highly clean, very efficient, but the only issue is that the technology is very expensive. Obviously, fuel cells are very expensive. Then sourcing of hydrogen is also very expensive or polluting. That's the issue, because we we have had very little success in developing green hydrogen at a large commercial scale. But if hydrogen is been, once we are able to tap into that level, this is a very good, very good replacement for fossil fuels. So all three are right. So option 3. Again, I am telling you, learn about hydrogen rainbow: gray hydrogen, green hydrogen, pink hydrogen, then also all the sort of hydrogens that I have mentioned in the previous sessions. So go through that. So it's worth looking at that. Okay, moving on. Consider the following statements regarding mercury pollution. Okay, gold mine. Mercury, we all know, it's from the name itself, it's a toxic chemical. Earlier we used to have thermometers with mercury, but right now they are being slightly phased out because of the risk of mercury exposure, because they are very carcinogenic and they are very toxic in nature, and they can cause biological accumulation, biomagnification effect in animals and humans. So especially if you are consuming higher order species like tuna, fishes like tuna for a long time, there could be a effect of biomagnification happening of mercury. Okay, that's one thing you need to know. That's if you are consuming higher order species like tuna fish, or maybe if you are having meat of cats, like big cats like lion or tiger, they have higher levels of mercury in their body. So that's one reason we don't consume higher order animals. So that's one thing. So mercury pollution, gold mining activity is a source of mercury pollution in the world. Gold mining is a highly polluting activity, so there is a good chance that it could be a source of mercury pollution, because since gold is being extracted, and from that particular ore there could be a lot of compounds finding, and mercury could also be found in that. So that is possible. Coal-based thermal power plants cause mercury pollution. That is also true. As like I said, mining, thermal power plants, they are all highly polluting, and they actually emit assortment of pollutions, including heavy metal poisoning. Mercury is also heavy metal. Mercury, arsenic, cadmium, nickel, they are all the heavy metals, and the pollution caused by them are called heavy metal poisoning. So this is possible. There is no known safe level of exposure to mercury. This is slightly debatable, since the Minamata Convention is there, and there has been argument that any level of exposure to mercury is toxic. But by the common logic, there is that any compound will be, at some point in life, will be exposed to mercury. Everybody in the life will be exposed to some level of mercury, but not everybody is getting mercury toxicity. So by that logic, we could actually move on to that. There is no known safe level. At the smallest of the concentration there, that mercury will be safe by that logic, because at some point in life everybody would have come across mercury exposure. So going by this logic, this seems that we all will be having some sort of mercury toxicity, and that could be having an adverse effect on our health. But that's not the case. Not everybody will be having a mercury toxicity, meaning that there should be some safe level. But there is a debate going on that whether this statement is right or wrong. But the common logic, using your common logic and not sticking onto the fact as such, there could be some safe level, because we all would have been exposed to mercury in some point in our life. So this is wrong, and we can choose only B as the answer. I think UPSC has also given only B as the answer. So that's the thing. Moving on, I think you have got the idea. Learn about Minamata Convention. It's a convention on controlling mercury pollution. It's very important, and it's a legally binding. So if any question about Minamata Convention comes and it says legally binding, and you think that it's an extreme statement, you could be wrong. Minamata Convention is legally binding. So look at that. Okay. Wolbachia method is sometimes talked about with reference to which one of the following? This has been actually in the current affairs for the last 2-3 years. I think in 2021 and 2022. And UPSC hasn't asked any question back then. But in 2023, when this was not much in the current affairs, UPSC has asked. The issue is that you cannot actually do anything about it. So for such questions, this is where reading the current affair actually helps. But the kind of reward you get from reading will be limited to 3 questions at max. I would say we'll be having a question like this where no logic is possible. So I have taken this question to particularly demonstrate that sometimes we will be lost, and there is no way we could be actually able to crack this question based on logic. This is strictly factual, and we cannot actually go through these questions and go through these options and arrive at the answer, because I couldn't find any logical way where you could actually arrive at the answer. but luckily these sort of questions will be less in number. At most there will be 3, and if you are following the current affairs reasonably well, you won't be missing out on these things. Okay, so the answer is A only. The reason why I have taken this because there could be times when current affair knowledge, or even if you have read about current affairs, you could have missed this, but it doesn't really matter. Those kind of questions will be at most in number of 3s, maximum 3. 0 to 3 is the kind of questions you can expect at this level, and it's okay if you take the risk and okay if you leave the question, so it's fine. Spreading. Okay, moving on. Consider the following activities. How many of the above activities are often considered and discussed for carbon capture and sequestration? Basically, what is carbon capture? The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is being stored in a place where that is being not freely available, meaning that we are reducing or capturing the carbon that is found in the atmosphere, which is a good thing. Obviously, higher the number of carbon, higher the amount of carbon, higher the global warming or higher the warming effect, things like that. So sequestration of carbon is a good thing, and those things that actually effectively capture the carbon and sequester them are called carbon sinks. For example, wetlands, mangroves, they are also wetlands. Basically, wetlands, they are all good carbon sinks. Tropical forests are also good carbon sinks, because these trees are actually, the way the trees grow is because they are capturing the carbon and storing them in their wood, and basically this wood is carbon only, so that's how they act as carbon sinks. So that's the case. Wetland also are very good source of carbon capture or carbon sinks. Ocean obviously is the largest carbon sink, so that is there. So moving on, spreading finely ground basalt rock on farmlands extensively. This may sound a little absurd, but this is actually right. This basalt rock has a property of capturing. Since it has got a larger surface area, it has actually got the ability to capture the carbon and store it. So this is actually a very effective way to carbon capture. This is factual, but this may sound absurd for some people. Even for me, it was absurd. So I couldn't make it right in the first time because I missed out on the factual logic. So, but after the examination only, I came to know that this is a very effective tool, effective practice for carbon capture. So I wouldn't, I cannot blame you for not taking this as absurd, because even I found it absurd at first. Increasing the alkalinity of oceans by adding lime. Again, this sounded absurd at first, but I was like, the reason why alkalinity of normally there is a process of ocean acidification, and the acidification happens because of why? Because the freely available carbon dioxide gets dissolved into the ocean and it forms an acidic property, because when carbon dioxide dissolves in water, it takes up a acidic form or carbolic acid, or I don't remember the exact name of the compound, but it takes an acidic form, just like in the fizzy drinks that we drink, the soda we have. It's basically carbon dioxide dissolved in water. It slightly has an acidic pH. So increasing that or reducing that acidic pH, meaning that more carbon could be absorbed or stored in the oceans, meaning that we are desaturating or acidifying the ocean water by adding lime. This seems a very possible scenario. At first, thinking about the scale of things, it may seem absurd, but reducing or increasing the alkalinity or reducing the acidity can actually increase the amount of carbon dioxide that is being stored in the oceans. Thus, it seems possible. That's how I actually took it as a right answer. Then moving on, capturing carbon dioxide released by various industries and pumping them into abandoned subterranean mines in the form of carbonated waters. Exactly what we have discussed earlier. Carbonated water, meaning that water that is being saturated by carbon dioxide, basically a carbon sink, and we can actually store it in subterranean mines. Obviously possible. They could be acting as carbon sinks. This is possible. These two are very much possible. This is factually right. So answer is 3. Okay. So that's about it. Moving on. Try to remember this thing. Basalt rock can actually absorb the carbon and act as a carbon sink, and this is also possible. Okay. Another important area where we need to discuss. In India, the biodiversity management committees are key to the realization of objectives of Nagoya Protocol. If you remember correctly, we have 2 major protocols regarding biodiversity management or genetic modification. They are Cartagena Protocol and Nagoya Protocol. And these Nagoya Protocol has got major pillars like access and benefit sharing, access and benefit sharing. So basically, what that says that is that if you are using the biodiversity information or biodiversity resource of an area, the access and benefit arising out of this. For example, if a corporate is using a particular genetic data of a region, they should actually share the benefit arising out of it, the capital benefit sharing arising out of it with the communities associated with that particular genetic resource. This genetic resource could be plants or animals. Okay, so that's the basic idea of Nagoya Protocol, and they also ensure that indigenous communities are properly compensated for the use of the genetic data that they are the genetic data of the ecosystem that they are part of. To understand simply is that imagine a forest where they have a particular plant species which is very good for countering any or it is a very good source of cancer cure medicine. A company can actually take up the genetic resource data of that particular plant species, and the indigenous community of that forest need to be compensated from the profit arising out of that product development. That's the basic idea. So that's part of the Nagoya Protocol. The biodiversity management committees have important functions in determining access and benefit sharing, including the power to collection of levies, fees, access to biological resources within its jurisdiction. It makes sense. And one important, like I have always said, in India, the three key environmental legislations are Environment Protection Act, Biodiversity Protection Act, Biodiversity Act, and Wildlife Protection Act. So this is the part of Biodiversity Act 2002. So this is important, and the BMCs are actually a core component of Biodiversity Act of 2002. So this is the exact mandate of BMCs. They have to actually maintain a biodiversity register of the genetic information of particular region, and they can have a they really have a say in access or sharing that particular genetic information. So this makes sense. And one other protocol regarding this genetic modification or biodiversity management are Cartagena Protocol. Okay, remember that. So that's it. So I think you all understood the kind of logic we used and the kind of knowledge we need to have taking cues from this particular set of questions. So what all things I have said as takeaways, try to learn about them, especially the nitrite and the environmental legislation that I have said, and go through this Minamata Convention. So go through them, and this will very much reward you in the upcoming years, where UPSC tends to make the questions in a way that it is more factual in nature. So we will be ready with the fact if that's required, or the logic if that's required, and mostly we'll be dealing with a combination of these two. So that's about it. Happy